From the shores of Malibu where the waves are pumping, to the Great Wall of China and back to the streets of Las Vegas where the UFC is coming. We are live. This is It's Time Radio, the show where we talk about what you think about but may be afraid to voice. Do not worry, we will talk about it for you. We talk about everything on It's Time. No holds barred radio, folks. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, UFC, film, TV, politics, you name it, we're going to talk about it. I'm here with my co-host, TJ DeSantis. TJ, another week gone by, UFC Fan Expo, a lot of things happening. We'll talk about it on the show, but we have a very special guest, somebody I've wanted to have on the show for quite a while. We've had kings on the show, we've had queens on the show, but we have the king on the show. We have the man who's definitely one to be reckoned with. Five-time ADC world champion, two-time IBJJF no-gi world champion, four-time Eddie Bravo invitational champion. I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know what else I have to say. All I know is that we have him on the show. Let's bring him on. The king, Gordon Ryan. Gordon, how are you, bud?
I'm good. I can't complain. How are you?
I'm very, very good. Very good. I got to tell you, man, that I go through all these pictures. I was looking at promo pics for the show promo, and I'm seeing you with dark hair, light hair, that hair, this beard, no beard, muscles through your muscles, muscles in your muscles. This look is good, man. This look is really cool. This is like movie stuff. You know, I see you with Jason Momoa running around doing whatever. You got a little Jason Momoa stuff going on. This Gordon Ryan-ish, we'll call it, not Momoa-ish.
Yeah, I'm trying to go for like with the slick back. I'm trying to go for like 80s Arnold and Raw deal.
Some of the worst acting ever, but you gotta love Arnie, right?
Oh yeah.
Let me tell you, you speak about Schwarzenegger. They have his Netflix special, which I think is a 3-episode show. I don't know if you saw it or not.
Yeah, I watched it.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I always knew that Arnold was a millionaire before he ever became a champion bodybuilder with his work with his buddy Franco Colombo laying bricks and investing in real estate and all. I met him back here. I moved to California in 72, and I met Arnold in 75 and back in his prime. And I used to go to breakfast at a place called Kenny's Deli up in Santa Monica, California. Every morning at 9 o'clock, he would walk in. It's like I literally saw him 4 or 5 days a week just coming into the breakfast joint. And then we had the pleasure of meeting and becoming friends numerous times over the years. Really, really cool guy. So you know what? If it's a good role model for you and that's where it's at, then go for it.
Yeah, I basically grew up on first it was like Toy Story, and then like right from Toy Story, I escalated to basically Predator and Terminator 2 were like the only movies that I watched like from like the age of like 7 until like high school.
TJ,
That's quite the leap.
It actually fascinates me to hear you say that, Gordon, because I realize you're what, you're 28?
28, yeah.
28, yeah. And I'm 66, and I'm thinking, he's talking about stuff that I was doing in my 30s. It's like, wow. Crazy. So you got a lot going on, Gordon. I mean, there's obviously you've been, let's start off. You know, you're such a champion. You're such a competitor. I had the pleasure of announcing you at the ADCC submission finals in Vegas last year, which it's just amazing to watch your work. You know, you're awesome. I've been loving doing the ADCC since 1997. I think was the first time, or 98, when the first time I did them back in Abu Dhabi. You know, for the sheikhs over there. But to watch you perform and do what you do best, I mean, you're just a master. It's unreal.
Thank you.
But then you got slammed. I mean, tell us what happened here. A prime individual like you, just a walking human specimen. And what happened here? 40-day antibiotic. I'm still unclear on exactly what happened.
Yeah. So first of all, I remember that the first time you announced me was in 2016 for EBI. When you were doing the EBIs, and I was like, "Fuck, this is cool!" Like Bruce Buffer's announcing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I was the Iron Dragon back then. I wasn't King Ryan.
Okay.
And so I was like, "Oh man, it's really cool." Bruce is introducing everybody. But yeah, in 2018, I had recurring staph infections just from like dirty mats. And I was like pounding medicine, and the medicine just wiped my stomach out because I was on so much antibiotics for my staph that I took antibiotics for the staph. It would mess my stomach up, and then my immune system would be kind of weak from trying to fix my stomach. And then I would get staph again, and I would take more medicine, and I just kind of got caught in this loop where I was like probably on antibiotics more days in 2018 than I was off antibiotics. Like it would just be like 2 weeks on antibiotics, And like 2, 3 days, I'd be fine. Staph again, 2 weeks in antibiotics, 2, 3 days. And it was just like, it was miserable. And then so I didn't compete like the first half of 2018 because my stomach was so messed up. And then I was trying to go to different stomach doctors and figure out what was wrong, and nobody could figure it out. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to deal with it. I'm young. It should get better. You know, I was like 22, 23 at the time. And I was like, it'll just get better. Like eventually I'm young. It has to. And so I kind of just tried to deal with it going into late 2018, 2019, and then 20. And then I went to like 4 or 5 different doctors, like maybe a half a dozen doctors that are supposed to be like the best in the country for GI issues. And they just do like the same blood work. They do like an endoscopy. So like a couple of guys did a colonoscopy, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're fine." And I'm like, "I'm not fine." So like finally in 2020 or 21, in 2021, I was so nauseous that I like literally couldn't even talk. Like I couldn't even hold the conversation. And I went on Rogan's podcast the first time, and I'm just like, I have no recollection of what we even talked about because I was so nauseous. I was like just trying to hold it together. And then like shortly after that, I was like, I can't even like hold the conversation. I can't train properly. Like I'm not going to keep competing if I can't do this like the way that it should be done. It's just not professional. So I was still winning matches, but I just was like, this is just not professional. And, you know, I feel like my quality of life is just so poor that it doesn't make sense for me to just focus on keep doing camps. Like I'm just going to stop competing. So I announced that I was like taking a leave of absence from competition. And I didn't know if I was going to be back because at that point it had been like 4 years, 3 or 4 years almost, with doctors just not being able to figure out what was wrong with me. And so I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to, you know, come back here. And I finally, thanks to Mo Jasdam from ADCC, he had a stomach doctor who he does like Western medicine and holistic stuff in California, actually. His name is Dr. Rabar out of LA, integrative gastroenterology. And he actually figured out what it was. And before he even did blood work, he figured out like he like guessed like half the things that were wrong with me. And everything he did was spot on. And so now I've been on this treatment for like 2 years, and my stomach's probably like 80, 85% better. It was actually doing really good. It was like 90, like over 90% better, I would say. And then like just recently I had some antibiotic resistant crazy strain of strep throat that they couldn't cure. And I was on like 45 days of antibiotics straight. And so that kind of relapsed my stomach. And then they figured that the strep colonized my tonsils, so they wanted to get my tonsils out, but I also had a deviated septum, so they're like, let's just do them at the same time. So I ended up doing the strep throat, and then I got my tonsils taken out, and I have my deviated septum fixed, and now hopefully I'm like back to normal. I just got cleared to start training hard again this week, so hopefully I'm like on the mend back to competition.
Wow. Okay, so in a
That's
nutshell,
a fight
the
right
last
there,
time-
Buff. My goodness.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, the last time you competed was when?
Last time I competed was December on the Fight Pass Invitational, and then I was supposed to compete against Felipe Pena in December or in February, but I got a stomach virus like the week of the event, and I had like crazy diarrhea, and I was like super dehydrated. I was trying to do IVs because that was like the best camp I ever had. I felt better than ever, like way better than I did for the ADCC camp. But I just was so sick that I couldn't compete. So I had to pull out of that match. And then right off of pulling out of that match, I got strep throat. And then I've just been sidelined ever since.
So now are you good to go?
I'm hoping so. Yeah. It seems like it's always one thing after the other, but I'm always trying to stay positive. And, you know, once I finish one thing, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go now. So I'm hoping I'm going to hop back into a routine, get back into training. I'm filming some instructionals right now. But once I finish that, then we'll be back into a routine. And then I'm hoping to come back to do an October card. And then I'm hoping to headline that Fight Pass Invitational in December with George and do co-main and main event.
Yeah, that would be great. When George St. Pierre steps on the mat, it's going to be awesome. I'm so happy to see him coming back and compete. I hope it gives him the edge and maybe he wants to step in and have one more MMA fight.
I know.
Oh, man, you're greedy, Buffer. Come on.
I know, but, you know, what can I say? Wishes are wishes. What can I say? But I'll tell you what, Gordon, you know, all this rough stuff, and I'm sorry to hear you're going through all this, but all this rough go that you've had, which comes on the heels in January when you signed your 7-figure deal, you know, your sponsorship deal. which I got to say the timing of that with everything going on is perfect. Does that, I have to ask, because I mean, I'm a businessman, I deal with contracts all the time. Does your Flow Sports agreement, are they sticking to it through all this?
Well, yeah. So I was supposed to do 5 matches with 5 matches, 7 figures for this year, but they were all to be determined dates because you can't plan. No, different athletes have different schedules, so they were all just to be determined dates. So I'm still getting paid the same for the matches, but the 5 matches just won't happen this year because I've been sick the whole year. So they'll just carry on into 2024.
Okay, so but they're honoring their contract.
Yeah, yeah. It was supposed to be. They were all to be determined dates, so it was just one master contract, and then we had like another, and then we had like individual, amendments for when the dates were going to be signed because all the athletes have already agreed. It's just determining dates. So they were supposed to happen in 2023. I was going to try to do a really heavy 2023 and then rest like the first half of 2024, and then do like a few warm up matches before ADCC. But then I've been sick for the last 4 months, so I kind of got sidelined. So now those matches, the ones that I haven't done, I'm hoping to do one of them. One of them was supposed to be Felipe, so I'm hoping to do one of them in October, and then do hopefully 4 of them next year at some point.
Okay, well, don't do them on October 26th when Ngannou fights Tyson Fury, because I think a lot of eyeballs are going to be on that show. For sure.
No, I think the first Flow show in October is going to be early October. So.
Very cool. While I said that, I want to go. I'll go into Ngannou and Tyson again, but getting back to the money, it's I'm all about whether you're a jiu-jitsu competitor, MMA, striking, whatever. I mean, when you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears on the line, I want people to get paid a lot of money.
Of course.
I'm so happy to see that even back in the days of ADCC, when guys were competing for, no matter what they got from the Sheikh Tanoon or whatever, when you went over to Abu Dhabi, all the gifts. I mean, Mark Curry used to get treated like to hundreds of thousands of dollars with the stuff. But I mean, to compete for $1,000, and now you go into Eddie Bravo's organization in the EBI Invitationals, and what is he paying TJ, like 12.5 a submission?
I mean, it depends. Gordon, did you have a $50,000 payday at EBI?
Mine was potentially 50, but I only had 2 subs in regulation, so it ended up being 25. But that 25 for me, I was working, like I just finished working as like a garbage man. And I was making like 24,000 a year as like a part-time garbage man,
wow.
like before I like went into my professional career. So I was like, oh my God, I'm rich. I just made more money in a day than I made the entire year working as a garbage man.
You know, it's crazy. I mean, we're talking about a sport where for the longest time, and still to this day, like if you want to compete, you have to pay generally. Not a lot of guys making their living by competing in no-gi grappling. And I think Gordon, Bruce, is really sort of the trailblazer in the sense of he's the first sort of mainstream combat sports athlete that the next generation can look up to and be like, yeah, I want to be that guy. I want to try to win my money on the mat, not by, going out and having a good performance in like a super fight and then trying to sell seminars. Like Gordon is able to focus on himself as a competitor in, it's prize fighting, even, grappling, it's prize fighting. And, for the longest time, I don't think that the prizes were really, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze for a lot of jiu-jitsu guys for a long time. And Gordon is changing that.
No, that's good. I mean, that's called being a pioneer, Gordon. You're a pioneer in your own way in the sport, even though it's been around a while. You're a role model in the sport. People are looking up to you. When you turn right or you turn left, people are going to think about, I should turn right and I should turn left. It's a large responsibility, but with greatness comes great responsibility, as they say. And I think you should just be shooing it up like there's no tomorrow. Be proud of it. Do you get off on that? Do you like the fact that people are on you and eyes are on you and you're basically a role model for the sport? Does that affect you at all?
No, I like it. And, I'm one to look to add pressure to myself. Like I did the Vision this year, plus a super fight for ADCC. I go out and call my submission. So I like the additional pressure. I like the eyes on me. And the more people watching, the bigger the crowd is, the more I kind of come to life. So I like the attention. A lot of people shell up with the attention, but I thrive on the attention, and it motivates me and helps me kind of come out and be who I am.
Very honest answer, and I respect you for it. Thank you. I appreciate that. I like that a lot.
Hey, real quick, on the business tip, Gordon, tell me about your background growing up a little bit. I mean, obviously the fight game is something that, everyone wants to aspire to be great. Few can actually reach it. But were you prepared mentally for handling your own career? Do you have a manager? Like, what was the process like when you went from being that garbage man to being the face of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Well, John set me, Gary Tonin, and Eddie Cummings down when I was like 16 or 17. And, those guys are the pros. I was just there, as a training partner, aspiring to be good. And he set us down and he gave us a whole speech on how the number one thing is to be the best in the world. He's like, if you're the best in the world, everything after that comes easy. Like, it's easy to talk shit. It's easy to promote yourself. It's easy to market. But like going out and winning consistently against the best guys in the world is the hard part. And so he's like, there's two ways to be exciting. He's like, you can be exciting inside competition or outside competition. He's like, if you look at a guy like George, he's like, George was never really a shit talker, and he wasn't really like that exciting outside of competition, but he would just beat people all the time, and he won for a decade straight or more. He's like, if you look at Anderson, he's like, he didn't really have that crazy antics outside the cage, but he would go in and he would make people look like they never trained before. He's like, if you contrast that to a guy like Chael, he's like, Chael's obviously a great fighter, but like Chael's not a guy who won, the UFC belt and then defended it for, 8 years in a row. He's like, but Chael was so interesting outside of competition that he got eyes on him and he got people interested in the fights.
Wait, I thought he beat Anderson Silva in Abu Dhabi. I'm just kidding. Good.
I mean, if you ask Chael, yes.
Yeah.
And so he's like, it's like, if you look at the people historically who are the highest paid and the most well remembered, it's people who were the best in the world who could perform inside competition, but also could create outside of competition drama. If you look at Ali, McGregor wasn't really around at the time, but so if you look at Ali, if you look at Tyson, if you look at Mayweather, if you look at all the great combat athletes who are most well remembered and made the most money, he's like, there were always people who could do the pre-fight drama and get people interested and then go out and actually win consistently. And this was like kind of around the time when I was starting to compete, and I didn't really have a brand yet. But when I remembered that when I won EBI 6, because that was the first time that people really started talking shit. Like, oh, if Yuri wasn't tired, he never would have lost to Gordon. And I'm like, do I respond to these people or not? And then I kind of remembered that. And then I saw like a comment section of GSP's Instagram, and it was just like 90% people talking shit. And I'm like, if people are going to talk shit on George, they're going to talk shit on anybody. So I may as well just have fun and make a bunch of money doing this. So, and then I started calling myself King Ryan, and then it kind of just snowballed from there. But like a lot of how I think about the business side of this, which most people wouldn't even think that this is the case. But John taught me a lot of this stuff, and he's been around combat forever, and he's super smart, obviously, and he studies just like the history of combat in general on both sides of it, the entertainment side and the combat side. And so John taught me a lot of the business stuff and a lot of the ways on how to build a brand and a persona coming up through my career.
You mentioned George St. Pierre a couple times, and there are many comparisons, I think, between you and GSP, but one that many people might not know about, George also a former garbage man.
Yes, he is. He is. Yeah. He was a garbage man in Montreal, and he would drive down to train with John and the guys in the city, and then John would teach him a lot of stuff, and then he would go back and train with Firas, and he would show Firas the stuff that John would teach, and they would kind of collaborate on moves, and then they would practice, and then he would kind of go back and forth between the two. But when he first started fighting, he was also a garbage man. I was like throwing leaf bags, like that was my thing. He was like an actual garbage man.
Right.
But yeah, pretty much the same.
I love it. I love from rags to riches, shall we say? If you can look at it that way. So, Gordon, being as masterful and as dominating as you are on the mat, submission, grappling, jiu-jitsu, and all that goes with it, obviously you get asked a lot of questions. Do you ever want to fight MMA? Do you ever want to compete in like the UFC? Or not? Do you think that's ever on your list in the future? Or are you going to concentrate, considering how fast and forward the grappling world is moving financially and everything else, and just concentrate on where you're king?
Well, so I was actually going to fight MMA in 2019, but then I tore my LCL, and then right off of that, I had to jump back into an ADCC camp. And so then I did the ADCC camp, and then I won the absolute, and then I had to fight Andre, and I kind of kept getting roped back into jiu-jitsu. And John at one point sat me down, and he's like, dude, he's like, just fucking stick with grappling. He's like, you're already the greatest of all time. You make a bunch of money, and the sport is right on the cusp now of like being projected into that mainstream kind of sports area. And so he's like, if you leave the sport now, like it's going to devolve back into what it was because there's no stars in the sport. He's like, it's like you are literally the only hope the sport has right now of becoming a mainstream sport. And John has never been wrong about anything, whether I thought he was wrong and then like 5 years later he ended up being right. Like he's pretty much spot on with everything that he says. So I tend to kind of agree with John that at least for right now, until one of my guys either takes my spot and wins the absolute in ADCC, or there's like another legitimate star that is bigger than the sport of jiu-jitsu, like unless there's like another Tony Hawk, I think right now I have to at least stick with grappling because I feel like I can get it into a situation where we are a mainstream sport and athletes are actually getting paid real athlete money to compete. So for right now, at least I'm sticking with just jiu-jitsu.
Good. You know what? I totally commend that answer. I'm with you completely 100% on that answer.
Hey, real quick on that tip, I know it was talked about, I think in like 2017, but Eddie Bravo continues to sort of push the envelope, be innovative with his shows, and it was promoted that you were going to have a combat jiu-jitsu match with Fabricio Verdum. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition. Would you be open to combat jiu-jitsu, Gordon, or is that off the table?
Yeah, I would do combat jiu-jitsu just because it's so closely related to jiu-jitsu that I wouldn't really have to do like a separate camp that takes me away from my jiu-jitsu training. Like if I did an MMA fight, I'd have to do like an MMA, like a camp that would take me away from like my no-gi jiu-jitsu goals, right? But combat jiu-jitsu is basically just what we do every day. The bottom is all about inside position, which is what I do anyway, so you can't get hit. And then the top is just basically doing jiu-jitsu, and you can throw some slaps here and there, but the slaps don't really do enough to actually hurt people for the most part. So it's mostly just jiu-jitsu with a little bit of fake strikes, essentially. So I would definitely do that. And then it's EBI overtime. So you're basically just preparing for like an EBI match with some additional strikes. And then, John has taught a lot of his, like he calls it grapple boxing, because it sounds more sophisticated than ground and pound. So he taught us a lot of his grapple boxing system. So, I mean, I'm pretty confident going into a match and not really deviating too much from my other no-gi goals. Whereas if I did an MMA fight, it's completely different. I would have to completely change my mindset and my goals for that part of my career.
Yeah, you would, but from a powerful human being, especially in the size and the body weight that you would compete at, those open hand slaps, if placed, properly, they can hurt.
Oh yeah, you can definitely knock someone out, but it's not even close to the same thing as like being hit with an elbow, for example. Like
of course.
Yeah, like so like you definitely can get knocked out if a guy hits you at distance with power. But the chances of being like severely injured or getting caught or getting knocked out are drastically less than if there was actual punches or elbows or other strikes.
Gotcha. And that's the thing about combat jiu-jitsu is, Eddie talks about this all the time. Like, yes, you can win by TKO or knockout, but the bottom line is it's still a jiu-jitsu tournament. The goal is still to get to a submission, but it keeps jiu-jitsu a little bit more honest than, in a real life street conflict, you're not going to pull guard in the middle of an alley when someone wants to fight you.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course. And it's cool, too, because they have the get down rule. So if there's too much wrestling, then one person has to start on top and one person has to start on bottom. So it's definitely an interesting rule set, and I would definitely be open to competing, in one of those. I was going to compete against Fabricio, which Verdum, but that's where I tore my LCL, so I had to get surgery on that, and I was kind of like I was at the event, but I was hobbling around in my knee brace before I got surgery.
So now one last serious question. It's just an overall general question. USADA entered the world of MMA. As grappling gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and TJ, refresh me, does the commissions have to watch over the grappling events?
No. So in certain states, combat jiu-jitsu is regulated by the athletic commission, but for the most part, jiu-jitsu is able to sort of run freely. I think IBJJF does some testing. ADCC doesn't. Fight Pass Invitational doesn't. It's sort of this autonomous world.
Do you think if USADA steps into this world, it's going to change the game a lot for the grappling world?
I think that if USADA steps into like Fight Pass events, for example, it's going to ruin Fight Pass events. And the reason is that because if you're competing in a Fight Pass event, or if you're competing on Fight Pass Invitational and you're getting randomly tested, that means now that you're the only person in the sport who's getting tested, and a person who's competing on Flow Grappling, for example, or one championship isn't getting tested, or in other organizations, they aren't getting tested. And so that means you have to be competing natural for those specific events when everyone else in the sport can be on PEDs. And so that puts you at an extreme disadvantage for no reason, unless you're getting paid absorbent amounts of money to not, like if you're exclusive, then it makes sense because you wouldn't compete in the other events anyways.
Right.
But if you're not exclusive and you want to compete on a flow show, like if I have an event in July on a flow, or like late July on a flow show, on a Fight Pass show, and I'm being tested, and then I have an event on a flow show like the next weekend or 2 weeks later, like I'm competing natural on this one event, and then this other guy's been on an 8-week cycle for me that like 2 weeks later, like it makes a difference. So if USADA steps in, like to only, I mean, for IBJJF, it's a little bit easier because it's just, the day of the test, so you can beat the test pretty easy. But if you do the random testing, then it's a lot harder to beat. You need like a team of doctors to give you like, blockers and stuff like that. So it makes it a lot harder. But I think if USADA comes into just one organization, it's gonna pretty much crush that organization, and athletes will just not compete in that organization because there's no reason to. I mean, unless they're exclusive, there's no reason to, because that means they would have to compete in other organizations being natural, and they put themselves willingly at a disadvantage. So it doesn't really make sense for them to do that. If USADA comes in and tests everyone across the board, then it makes sense because everyone's being tested, but there's not one governing body in jiu-jitsu that controls everything. So in order for USADA to come into one championship, or WADA to come into one championship, into Flow, into Fight Pass, into all the organizations is pretty into ADCC, which will never be in ADCC. The ADCC has publicly said we're never testing. And so it doesn't really make sense for them to do that. I think you're kind of just shooting yourself in the foot. If you bring USADA into like a Fight Pass Invitational, because people will just start not competing. And also fans don't realize, like, it's like, oh, well, jiu-jitsu doesn't test and everyone's juiced up. Everyone in most sports, like 95% or more of pro athletes, are also juiced up. It's just they have testing, but like, you don't think the NFL guys with the traps coming up to their ears are like out of their minds? Like, are you kidding me? So it's just a joke. But I definitely think that, USADA coming in would have to be across the board rather than just one organization or another. And if USADA did come in and started testing across the board, I would love to actually compete against all of my opponents natural, because the only way that they survive for any amount of time is they just juice their way out of things for 10 minutes until they get tired. Like, if they didn't have the physicality, the match would be twice as easy. Like,
right.
It would just, like, the only reason that they can survive against me is because they're so physically strong. I have to tire them out first, and then I can submit them. Whereas if they were just natural, they would just get tired instantly because they don't have the physicality, and then I would just submit them immediately. So everyone's like, oh man, Gordon's just on steroids, that's why he wins. Like, no, if everyone else is natural, it would be twice as bad because I'm far more technical, and the work rate is a lot higher for them. And because the physicality isn't there, they would just get tired faster. So this is just a big misconception that like idiot haters talk about and rationalize the reason why I beat everybody.
Another thing too, I think you hit the nail on the head, in my opinion, Gordon. I think it needs to be uniformity. The sport is not to a point where everyone's signing with a promotion, being exclusive, et cetera. But the other thing I think that would be a steep learning curve, especially for grapplers that haven't been submitted to USADA testing, is, everyone talks about steroids, but there are so many things that are labeled as performance enhancers that don't jump off the shelf as performance enhancers. There's plenty of things you can take from your local grocery store that will end up, costing you time and a suspension and a fine because they're on the USADA ban list. Like when USADA first came in the UFC, there were a ton of people testing positive for things that they had no idea that they were even taking, because it was, in supplements and or just straight up a PED that they otherwise didn't know was a PED.
Yes, of course. And you need like a team of people to be able to monitor that for you. That's another thing that people don't talk about too. Like, when you talk about like the Olympics, for example, like USADA and WADA are like, multi-million-dollar companies. There's like, there's many millions of dollars going into, drug testing. But like, you have the country of Russia, the country of Germany, the country of America, like sponsoring doctors to beat tests to win the Olympics. Like, there's a lot more money in the research to beat drug tests than there is actual drug testing. So like if USADA came into this sport, into jiu-jitsu, where no one has any money, and they said, okay, steroids are illegal now, and I wanted to cheat, I'm the only person in the sport that can actually afford to get a team of doctors to actually beat the test. So everybody else would be competing natural, and I could still be competing juiced up if I wanted to, because I can actually afford to have a team of doctors to beat the test. So this whole notion that like, oh, we need to bring USADA in, like, it just doesn't make any sense. And on top of that, there's not enough money in the sport to actually warrant USADA testing. Like, most athletes don't generate any revenue for the organizations they're competing for. So you're going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars through the entire year testing athletes, which aren't really going to bring in the revenue. Like, you're going to spend, like, the organizations are going to spend money on the athletes testing them. They're not going to make money with the athletes fighting. So it just financially doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense to have USADA come in, because the sport just isn't big enough yet. And if the sport does get big enough, it has to be uniform, where there's one governing body, or at least every organization agrees to bring in USADA or WADA to do testing. Like, you're a long way away from ever having the uniformity of USADA across the board.
Well, one thing that stands true here in this last 5-10 minutes of conversation, out of all the conversations we've had on USADA and testing, with whether it's head of USADA or whether it's with other athletes, again, I'm going to commend you again, Gordon. Your honesty and your openness about all this, and your truism about yourself and what it is to compete today. Actually a little blown away by the last 10 minutes, TJ, because this is the most honest dissertation I've heard from an athlete about USADA and the testing going on out of anyone. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I mean, Gordon is in the middle of it, like this is the thing. And I honestly, like, I don't feel bad for you, Gordon, but I do sort of sympathize with the idea that, you are the face of the sport, whether you like it or not. You're the face of this sport. You're going to get the love and accolades of people that adore you, and you're going to get the vitriol and hate of people that can't stand you. By the way, both of those audiences are great for business. They're going to keep putting money in your pocket. But you are sort of the go-to person for all of the questions, comments, concerns regarding the evolution of the sport, regulatory and otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people point fingers, but it's like, well, my whole brand is built on authenticity and being real. And so, like, what would you rather? You would rather have the guy telling you to, like, eat your fruits and vegetables, and, like, you can get just as jacked as him, and he just lies about it? Or would you rather have, like, an athlete actually talk about what's going on in the sport and, like, exposing the fake phonies that are like, oh yeah, like, not me, God, everything is God. And it's like, oh yeah, well, you're fucking sauced out of your mind. And like, you're just telling people you have to train hard. Like, it just comes down to, like, being authentic and, like, not caring about, number one, what people think. And number two, like, you're competing in a sport, in any sport, steroids are running rampant. Like, you think that guys competing in jiu-jitsu for $1,000 a match are doing steroids, and the guys, like, in the NBA competing for, like, hundreds of millions of dollars are not juiced out of their mind. Like, you think, like, a guy like, I think guys like LeBron, who are, like, 40 years old, like 6'8", like 250 pounds shredded. Like, do you think those guys, like, aren't juiced out of their minds? Like, it's just, people just have no idea because they're not involved in that world.
Right.
But I think that, just being authentic and actually talking about shit that people don't want to talk about can go a long way. And being fake about it, I think, is the worst thing. Like, and all the time, like, people who are most against steroids are always the people who take steroids. Like, we have, like, people who, like, used to be on our team who are, like, talking shit about steroids or, like, claim they're natural. And it's like, bro, you've asked me for steroid advice. Like, I know you're not fucking natural. Like, it's just like, and they just like build a brand off this, and then they get caught like Liver King. Like, oh yeah, I'm just, you know, lifetime natural, blah blah blah, and then it comes out like, oh, it's like, oh yeah, I actually was on steroids. It's always the guys who are talking about being natural, and that, you know, that's a claim to fame is being natural. Those are always like the heaviest users. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with Jeff Munson, former UFC heavyweight title challenger, in like 2007 or 8, and he said, similar to a lot of things that you're talking about, Gordon, like everyone is going to look for an advantage. If you're not looking to put something into your body that helps you be a better, you know, athlete, then you're not competing at the highest level. That said, he said, I can spend a bunch of money on supplements and try to get them to mimic the effects of steroids, or I can just buy steroids, which are cheaper, and they 100% act like steroids because they're steroids.
Yeah. And
Jeff Munson,
if you're competing in a sport where they're legal, who cares?
Right.
Yeah. Well, here, let's get off that. I think we kind of needled that to death. So we'll leave it there. Let's go into some other stuff, Gordon. Ngannou and fighting Tyson Fury on October 26th. How do you feel about that?
That's going to be interesting. Awesome. You know, first of all, props to Francis, because, you know, it took a lot of balls to be the UFC heavyweight champion, drop the UFC, and go out and look elsewhere, and then, you know, finagle himself into, I don't know, you know, 30, 40, 50 plus $million for a match with Tyson. Like, you know, he actually,
I don't know if it's that much money, Gordon, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, it might not be, but, you know, it's, even if it's not, something, boxing with the big names, something tells me he's making more money than he would have at the UFC. I don't know if that's true or not, but, you know, these boxing fights always have huge money. So, you know, if he finagled himself into a deal where he left the UFC and now he's making a ton more money, good for him. If not, then, you know, it is what it is. But as far as the technical aspect, you know, Tyson obviously is a much better technical boxer. He's much bigger than Francis, which is insane to think about because Francis is enormous. But you just never know with Francis. Like, all he has, like, he was like hitting Stipe like this, and he was like wobbling him. Like, all he has to do is connect one time. Obviously, the gloves are a lot bigger, so it's harder, and it's going to be harder for him to fit shots through the guard of Tyson. But if he does connect, you just never know with Francis. You can just never count him out because he has such extraordinary knockout power. But from a technical standpoint, you know, I think that Tyson definitely has a big advantage. But it's got to be interesting because, like, in jiu-jitsu, a lot of things have to go wrong for the worst grappler, for the better grappler to lose to the worst grappler. Like, you got to get taken down, you have to get your guard passed, you got to get your back taken, you got to get submitted. Like, in striking, you got to be in the wrong spot for a half a second and you get knocked out. So right. It's going to be interesting. Everyone's going to watch for sure. I think Tyson definitely has the definitive advantage if it's just boxing.
Well, you know, the good thing is that they're both going to make huge paydays. We have 2 boxing events coming up, Nate Diaz and Jake Paul, Ngannou and Tyson Fury, that, you know, most all the UFC MMA eyeballs are going to be on watching both these events. So let them make all their money. Ngannou, nothing but praise for Ngannou, nothing but respect for Ngannou. Grab that money, grab that 10, 20 million you're going to make, which he might even retire after that. Who even knows?
Hey, I don't agree with that, Buff. I think both Nate and Ngannou find their way back to the octagon before it's all said and done. Nate's still got to fight with Conor McGregor whenever he wants it. It could happen 15 years from now. People will still pay for that. And, you know, Francis, for whatever reason, a guy that really didn't resonate with a lot of casual fans, you know, for better or for worse. I think that this decision, it was a ballsy one. We talked about it, you know, to leave the UFC. And it seemed like it took forever for this to get announced and actually come to fruition. The fact that it's happening, I think win, lose, or draw, he's going to raise his value in the MMA space infinitely. And yeah, I think he'll be back in the UFC before too long.
Well, I said might because I hope he comes back. Bottom line.
Yeah.
I hope he comes back to balance out the heavyweight division and you know, have the true undisputed champion for sure. Speaking of UFC, we come off this weekend, which Gordon, you were there, you know, watching the show. We were all there watching the show. I was there announcing the show, but wow, considering UFC Expo Fight Week, the biggest show supposedly of the year, it paid off. This was the biggest show of the year, would you say?
Yeah, I mean that was the card was amazing, and all the way through the card was awesome. Some great fights. And who was it? Dan Hooker broke his arm, like broke his jaw, and still managed to win. Like that was nuts. And then obviously Volkanovski just proves that he just leaps and bounds above everybody in that division. So I think
Yeah,
through
he's a
and
goat.
through, the fights were all amazing, and then you have Volkanovski finishing it off with a very very dominant performance. So and then I was actually really surprised. Robert Whitaker lost. I looked at a stat. I think the only person Robert Whitaker has lost to, I think, in like the last decade was Adesanya. So
That's
the
it.
fact that he lost and it set up the next great title fight, between those guys, I think is a good storyline. And I think overall, just the whole fight week leading into that event, which was amazing, I think was just a perfect week, pretty much.
Absolutely. And then you got Brandon Moreno, who fought with a broken hand from the very first round for 5 rounds. I mean, it's the respect I have for these men and women and what they go through, as well as yourself, is tremendous. Bo Nickel coming in, champion wrestler. I talked to him after he knocked out Val Woodburn, and it's like there's really no question about Bo Nickel right now. Sure, it's 5-0. It's only 5 fights in MMA, but aside from being the master wrestler that he is, he came out like a striker and he took care of business right away.
He's a competent jiu-jitsu player as well. If people don't know, he did one of the Fight Pass Invitationals, and Bo willingly went to his back with Oliver Taza. Like the fact that he's as talented as he is as wrestling, and we're starting to see the hands. Like I think he's got tricks up his sleeve on the floor from a jiu-jitsu perspective that we're not even close to scratching the surface on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
he's willing to learn too, which is the big thing. Like if you're like putting yourself in a position in competition like that, because he knows the end goal is MMA, and so he's using jiu-jitsu competition to go out and practice stuff. Like that's like a learning mindset, and like that's a guy who's going to excel because he's actively trying to work on things that he's bad at under stress in competition.
Right. And then we have one of the most dramatic events of the evening, which was the retirement of Robbie Lawler after a commanding way to go out, taking out a very tough guy in Nico Price. That 3, 4, 5 punch combination from the inside, just wiping him out. Very emotional.
There's a tear in my eye, Buff.
Pardon me?
There was a tear in my eye watching him get his hand raised and the highlight package that the UFC production team put together.
Yeah, that was amazing.
The first ever UFC pay-per-view I bought was UFC 40. Robbie was in the first fight of the night against Tiki Gozin. You remember the fight that was stopped because of a cut?
Yeah.
In the fact that Tiki lost consciousness. But no, phenomenal stuff. I mean, as a hardcore MMA fan, it was very hard to stay composed among my coworkers on Saturday night when Robbie said farewell.
Exactly. And then on this Saturday night, I won't be there announcing. It's going to be Joe Martinez taking the announcing microphone. I'm going to be relaxing. Well, not relaxing. I'll be doing something, but heading off to London for next week's show. But Holly Holm back in the octagon against Myra Silva. A good solid card. Walt Harris back against Josh Parisian.
And that's great. A great story for Walt Harris to come back. I mean, the guy's been through so much personally.
Oh, my God. Can't even imagine what that man went through.
Yeah. Hey, while we have Gordon, I'm curious, Gordon. I want to pick your brain on this because I feel like where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and no-gi grappling is similar to where the UFC and mixed martial arts was in the early 2000s, just on the cusp of blowing up to become this mainstream sport. And the vehicle that really put mixed martial arts and the UFC on the map was The Ultimate Fighter. What would you think of an Ultimate Fighter reality show, but with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners and letting the casual audience sort of inside that bubble, through a 8 or 12 week television series culminating with a big fight card? Do you think that would work? Would that resonate the same way that The Ultimate Fighter did?
So I actually talked about this with the Fight Pass team, and I told them that they should definitely do this. It won't be. There's always going to be a limit on the cap of the amount of fans in jiu-jitsu is never going to be as big of a spectator sport as the UFC because there's no striking.
Right.
Yeah.
And people can relate more to striking than they can grappling. But I do think that it would be a huge success for grappling in general. Like Flow Grappling did the same kind of thing. They had like their Who's Next show, and they took 2 coaches, and then they put them in a house together, and they had their teams grapple, and then they had the finals on a Who's Number One show, which I headlined a few months later, and that was a huge success because it gives you drama and it gives you a story, and it gives the viewer at home a chance to get to know the athletes and to emotionally invest in and connect to their favorite athletes. And so it gives you that emotional element where you build a story up until the finals, and then you have, the athletes fight. So I think that anything that you can do to get the audience emotionally invested will definitely be big. And because you have so many people who are already watching jiu-jitsu, I think that the fan base is there. And if the UFC really puts money into doing like a high quality, show, they put the athletes in a nice big house. And I think the idea is that you want aspiring athletes and kids to look at this and be like, that's something what I want. That's something that's where I want to be. Like, I want to do that. Like you see the athletes, like these aspiring athletes who are competing on the show, like, in this mansion, in this big house, and they're hanging out with the best athletes in the world. And we're bringing in the best athletes. Like I'm bringing in GSP to run a grappling session for people, from the guy from, Arkansas who just wants to do jiu-jitsu for a living. And so people can watch that and they're like, wow, it's really cool. I wish I could do that.
Hey, two parts. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if they do it like that, I think that people could be really interested for sure.
Yeah, it's what it is. It comes down to one thing. It comes down to a number of things, but personalities of people.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
what's going to drive. That's what drives all these reality shows. Whether it's cooking or whatever, it's personalities. You can have all the different gizmos in there in the world, but it's personalities are going to drive the sport.
The other thing I think it comes down to is really refining the rule set for, engagement to the casual fan and getting that MMA fan to become, as hardcore of a grappling fan. So 2-part question for you, Gordon. One, what is your favorite rule set to compete in, round format, structure, et cetera? And what do you think is the most friendly for casual fans and viewers, and what rule set would you like to see sort of maybe adopted to get that casual combat sports fan and make them a grappling fan?
So this is a really interesting question. So my preferred rule set is obviously no time limit, because at some point the guy has to do jiu-jitsu, and then the more rules you have, the more the athletes are going to try to game the rule set, right? So like with ADCC, it's like, you stall and you wrestle, or you don't really try to pass in the first no points time, no point section. And then when points are initiated, then you try to score. Or like with EBI, you stall and then you go to overtime if you're good at overtime, and then you do that. So like anytime you have the more rules, the more the athletes are going to try to game the system. So my whole thing is I only liked the outcome of the match to be determined by the athletes. So that's why I like no time limit, because there's no judge's decision, there's no nothing, and eventually there's going to have to be jiu-jitsu. The problem with that is you can't do that all the time, because a match could theoretically be 3 hours long. Like on Who's Next, they have like a 4-hour long match, so you can't. It's not spectator friendly.
Right.
I think it's there's a place for it, and there's certain times when you should have no time limit matches to determine who is really the best athlete, who is the best at jiu-jitsu, rather than just the best at playing the rule set, because it's not always synonymous being the best at winning and being the best at jiu-jitsu. You can be a good winner but have terrible jiu-jitsu, and you can have good jiu-jitsu but not be a good winner. Right. I think that no time limit definitely doesn't work for spectators. And I think that EBI is good for spectators, because if you have if you go the full regulation and you don't finish, then obviously you go to overtime, which you start on the arm bar or you start on your partner's back, and the chances of submissions drastically increase. So there's 2 things that fans want. They want movement and they want submissions. If there's no movement, they're not excited. And if there aren't submissions, like our submissions for us is an equivalent of a knockout in striking. So they want obviously a definitive finish. And so the chances of there being a submission in overtime drastically increase. So that's definitely a good spectator rule set. The problem is that you're always going to have people complain about that, because they would say, oh, well, he would have never gotten his back in regulation, so it doesn't really count. Or, oh, this guy just games the system and he stalls for 10 minutes and then he just does the overtime. So the regulations are all so boring, and then you have 2 minutes of action in the overtime, and then it's exciting. So, that's definitely an issue. ADCC is also great because you have a lot of movement because of the scoring system. You can't just accept takedowns, and you can. There's a lot of wrestling scrambles that occur. So you have movement, and then you have a lot of submissions off of those wrestling scrambles. And a lot of times, guys get super tired, and as the fatigue sets in, then it becomes easier to get submissions. So I think ADCC obviously is very spectator friendly. We had 13,000 people in Thomas and Mack last year, and going to T-Mobile this year. So I think that kind of speaks for itself. EBI is a great rule set as well. And then, any kind of hybrid rule set, I think that we can come to an agreement on, where you have like MMA and jiu-jitsu crossovers, or wrestling and jiu-jitsu crossovers. Like the match with me and Bo Nickel got a lot of eyes on it, like that, stuff like that, where you can come to an agreed upon a hybrid rule set. But there's pluses and minuses to every rule set. And I think it really just comes down to the athlete. Like if you have an athlete that just trains all day to do the minimum to win, like he just wants to win by 2 points, no matter how much money you give him, or no matter what rule set, like the guy wants to win. Like he's going to train, he's going to compete exactly how he trains. Like if you put me in an IBJJF match, or an EBI match, or an ADCC match, I'm competing relatively the same the whole time through, because I just want to submit the guy. So it really comes down to the athlete and how the athlete trains.
What did you think of that? Sorry, Buff. What did you think of that Anthony Smith and Glover Teixeira rule set, where it was 4 3-minute rounds and 10-point must system? I think you were one of the judges of that.
Yeah, I was a judge for that. I actually think that's probably easier to convert your average MMA fan to, because they're used to the rounds. But I don't think it's conducive to actually get jiu-jitsu fans, or keep jiu-jitsu fans interested, because of the fact that the rounds are so short. Even a 5-minute round, it is very hard to get a submission in 5 minutes. And so like you spend 2 minutes trying to get a takedown, you spend 2 minutes trying to pass, and now you have 1 minute to try to submit the guy. Like the submission percentage is going to drastically decrease with the rounds. So if anything, I think it should be like what I suggested to Fight Pass is you should have belts that mimic UFC weight classes. And a standard match should be 15 minutes, and then a title match should be 25 minutes. And so you just do the same time limit as the UFC, but instead of breaking it up and having the guys restart neutral, you just do a full 15 minutes or a full 25 minutes straight. So that way the guy can keep progressing through positions until a submission.
And then it goes to the judges, or how would you score it if it goes the distance?
And then I think you either go to the judge. I think you either go to the judges, or you do an ADCC rule set where you just do a hybrid of like an ADCC rule set, but with different time limits, or you do EBI rules at the end. So I think those are.
Let me piggyback off of that. I like your idea. I like the idea of maybe 3 judges, but if they're not in agreement, say it's a split decision, then you go to EBI overtime.
You could do that too. One thing I suggested to Fight Pass 2, because most of the events are going to be in Vegas, so you can kind of tie into like the Vegas kind of theme of like gambling and stuff. The big issue you have is stalling, because when there's stalling, there's no movement and people get pissed, right? So
people get bored.
Instead of stalling and you adding time to the ride time or whatever the case is, or you're getting a negative, my idea is you put a screen for the audience at home, and you put a big like projector screen for the audience there, and you put a rolling dice on, and you roll the dice. And if it lands on number 1, you get to start in the guy's back. Number 2, you start in mount. Number 3, you start in armbar. Number 4, you start in side control. Number 5, you start in, whatever. And so you pick these different advantageous positions. And then whenever the dice rolls, you get to start on one of these positions, and then you go live from there. So you have movement and you have chance of submission. So it gives you both the things you need to be exciting.
Man, roll the dice. I love it.
Roll the dice. I like it too. Hey, Gordon, let's go over a few news stories. I'm going to let you go. Really appreciate your staying on the show for the length of time you have.
Of course.
I know you're a busy man.
No problem.
All right. So real quick, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, quick.
Okay. So Elon actually was training with John and the guys here, because George came and he was training with Elon. And Zuckerberg actually messaged me. He wants me to go out to California sometime and train with him.
Right.
So I didn't get to train with Elon or Zuckerberg yet, but John trained with Elon, and I've seen Zuckerberg, train and compete. And, Elon's a lot bigger than Zuckerberg, but he's also in his 50s, and Zuckerberg is in his 30s. And Zuckerberg trains like pretty religiously, from what I hear, and actually competes.
Yeah.
So if they were to compete in jiu-jitsu right now, which Zuckerberg, I talked to him, he's 100% in to fight Elon at ADCC for a super fight next year, and Mo will actually make that happen if he wants to do it. If they both want to do it. But if they competed in jiu-jitsu right now, I think Zuck would win pretty easily, because I think Elon doesn't really train that much. I mean, he trained judo apparently a long time ago, but the muscle memory, like, it's a diminishing skill. So the muscle memory isn't really probably there. And Zuckerberg is training like every day, like hard, and he's serious about it. Like, I sent him like some of my instructionals to watch. So he's like studying tape and taking it seriously. So if they competed right now, I think Elon would just get tired pretty fast, and Zuck would end up submitting him. But if Elon starts training, who knows? Because he is a lot bigger than Zuckerberg.
Exactly, and lay and pray is not going to work, with the size. So it'd have to be a competition. I'm with you on all that, and I do agree. I think Zuckerberg would take over at this point. I'm always made the best man, best woman win, but I agree with your analysis there. Flying cars, guys, 2025. First one's been FAA approved, $300,000.
People can't drive on the ground. How are they going to drive in the air?
They've already approved it. It looks like it's coming out 2025. We're going to start.
It's just a bad idea. Again, people don't know how to drive on the ground.
I'm not crazy about it either. I'll be honest with you. Not crazy about it either.
That's pretty cool. In Texas, I have a buddy who doesn't own a car. He just flies helicopters everywhere. In Texas.
Is he a super villain? That sounds like something a villain would do.
He shows up to Roco where we train, and he just lands his helicopter in the field. In Texas,
I love it.
That's Texas, awesome. As long as you're not breaking any of the aviation rules, and you have the landowner's approval, you can land your helicopter anywhere. He goes to church, and he knows the owner of he knows the people at the church, and he just lands in the parking lot next to the cars. So
oh my God.
If I was oh yeah, hey, come, you could just land them. He could land in my driveway of my house with his helicopter, and it would be totally fine.
I don't think Logan Paul's going to be landing any helicopters, with all respect, in Canada soon. They just pulled his Prime energy drink from the shelves in Canada.
Yeah, I think the FDA is looking into it as well, because apparently the same amount of caffeine in one Prime energy is equivalent to 6 cans of Coca-Cola.
Yes, but FDA approval allows for 200 milligrams of caffeine in their energy drinks here in the States. Canada allows for up to 180. And one of the big questions here, I spoke to Logan the other day, one of the big questions here is the fact of the marketing to the kids. It's also kind of if this is the proper term, a lobbyist type push by, let's say, the bigwigs like Coca-Cola, because Prime has grabbed 1-2% of the market right out of the gate, and that's a threatening total for a lot of companies.
I haven't had their energy drink, but their hydration drink is phenomenal.
There you go. Nice push. I mean, they're sponsors of the UFC, but anyway, that's one down there. What was the other here? Sorry, guys. Oh,
need to get a Gordon Ryan flavored Prime drink.
Yeah.
I had them at ABCC. Yeah. They were pretty good. I was drinking them all at ABCC.
Yeah, they're not bad.
Just wait for the big one coming out, guys. The big one is coming out soon.
That's good. That's good.
All good.
Hey, get me some of those.
Oh, you'll get it. You'll get it. Right after TJ gets his cologne.
Hey, I bought mine.
Oh, you did? Did you buy it at the show?
I did. No, I didn't buy it at the show. I bought it off Amazon. It smells great, Buff.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. #1 seller on Amazon. That's the total. That's the total. No, it is, Gordon. It's been the #1 seller. We've been selling it on Amazon like crazy. So, in Italy now, you know how they grab you? They're known to grab the girls and stuff like that. They're saying now a court ruling has found a school janitor not guilty of groping a student because the act only lasted less than 10 seconds. They're now looking.
Wait, what are you talking about? They grab girls in Italy?
Groping.
Who?
Italian men groping. You know how they grab you? Have you heard that at all?
No.
Maybe I better be careful on this story, but they're saying if you grope less than 10 seconds, it's not a crime.
That's insane to me.
Yeah, it is insane. It is insane. Exactly.
All right.
And this is going to be fast. I'm going in and out of these, okay? What was the other? Oh, Dana White came out, and I really want to push people to see this too, but Mel Gibson's new documentary, The Sound of Freedom, about child trafficking in this country. It's sick, gentlemen.
Have you seen it?
No, I'm going to see it, but I mean, the things I've read about it, pieces that I've heard about it, and I was talking to Mel Gibson about it at the show. This is a very, very serious documentary and something we should all be quite aware of.
It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying, and it's another reason to get your kids into jiu-jitsu.
People are complaining about it. I haven't seen it yet, but I think DC Drano today on Instagram posted like the same people who are endorsing the movie or the show Cuties are complaining about this one, and apparently it's like all liberals are mad about it or something. I haven't done much research, but I saw like people are starting to like get upset about it already. So I'll definitely watch it.
Yeah, I think it's something to definitely see. It's in the theaters right now. I want to thank our sponsor, medicaleverything.com. They've got a great story on inflammation, how it shortens your life, which I'm sure you'll agree with, Gordon. God knows you put up with inflammation and what you do, and I have too. It's just like the worst thing for the body. So do everything to stop the inflammation in the body, for sure. Another thing now, okay, guys, who eats at Burger King? TJ, I bet you do.
Hey, I resent that. I actually don't like Burger King, so I'm not going and getting a Whopper all that often.
All right, well, Burger King.
I don't eat it much, but I do eat it occasionally. I do like it.
All right, well, if you go to Thailand to train, they have a new burger in Thailand.
The cheeseburger.
20 slices of cheese, no patty. It's just a cheeseburger. 20 slices of cheese.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to have stomach issues, my God, like 20 slices, dude. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. 20 slices of cheese, and that's going to stick with you for like 5 weeks.
It's not going to go through you real quick, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you.
No, it's literally. I saw a picture of it. It's like they said, like the real cheeseburger, and it's literally just like 2 buns with just a stack of cheese in between.
Stack of cheese, crazy.
No, thank you.
They're coming up with a new COVID shot that should be ready by the latter part of September. I know I've been boosted. I know I've been vaccinated and boosted, but I think
my wife got COVID this week. Can you believe it? I didn't even know COVID was still a thing.
It's out again. I'm told by my gerontologist I work with, caring for my mom and other people. It's out again.
I mean, she was over it in like a day and a half, but still, like I didn't even think that people were still testing for COVID.
Yeah. No, it's out. It's still there. It's still there, guys. It's going to be there forever. We have to live with it. My partner in England that does the energy drink and my cologne and everything, he got a real bad case of it just about 3 weeks ago. So anyway.
My first one, I've had it like 3 or 4 times. My first one was pretty bad. I was like pretty sick for like the first week, and then I had symptoms through the whole second week. And like the second time I got it, it was like 3 days I was like sick, and then I kind of just got like colds the next time.
Yeah. I mean, if you're what is the term?
Immunity?
No, when you're compromised. You're compromised.
Oh, immunocompromised. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, or you're elderly or whatever. I mean, look, it's still serious stuff. Just got to be careful of yourself.
But I mean, that's anything. A common cold can get turn into pneumonia if you're 90 plus years old, and you know.
On the flip
really
side,
appreciate the time you're giving us, but we're going to sign off. So why don't you let us know anything you want to let your audience know, your fans know, whatever, promote anything you want right now. Go ahead and pop it out.
Not much. We have, I don't know when this is airing, but we have a big Prime Day sale on BJJ Fanatics right now, obviously. My instructionals are all on there. A couple seminars coming up. So if you guys are looking for Gordon Ryan seminars, I have a couple coming up in August and September. So that'll be happening. And then other than that, just look out for competitions, hopefully in October and December. And that's about it. Love all you guys.
You giving any cars away anytime soon again? I know you just gave away. Was it a Miata you gave away on Instagram?
So we gave away a Miata. I have to get rid of this batch of merchandise, and then the next one I'm probably going to do one eventually, maybe next year sometime before ADCC. I want to do probably like a C6 Z06 Corvette, because I've always wanted to have that car just to drive it around for a little while, and so I can drive it and then write it off and get rid of it. So it's like a perfect storm for me. So and who doesn't want a Corvette? So
I think that's so awesome. I don't know if you know this, Bruce, but Gordon, makes these things available to people online, and it's one of the coolest things to see. A poster child in combat sports, literally giving back to his fan base.
No, that's very cool. God, I should get Gordon on millions.co. He's perfect for it.
Yeah. Do you have like a line of apparel? Like, can I buy a Gordon Ryan T-shirt?
Yeah, I have them. They're on my website and my linked in my Instagram. So I did a batch before ADCC, and I had some guy that was managing it, and I had some trouble with him. So I got the merchandise back now, and I'm trying to get rid of it.
All right, you need to talk to Buffer. Buffer will hook you up with millions, and they'll handle everything and just cut you a check.
Do everything for you, Gordon.
Okay, yeah, that's maybe what I need.
No money to you, no stock. They ship, they do everything. It's a waste of time for athletes to make their own clothes to a large extent because you wind up spending more money than you make sometimes. You know.
Yes, correct.
And in this case, I can solve. I'll on a separate text. I'll set you up with my associate. Take a meeting with him. Look up millions.co. See what the Shevchenko sisters and everybody does there. They're doing fight watch parties, making money with sponsors, videos like Cameo, their own merch lines, and it's no cost to you. We do absolutely everything. It's a whole branding site that I created for athletes, not just fighters, but we have 5,000 athletes from football to NFL, baseball, NCAA. Check it out. Check it out.
Okay, nice. I will definitely
send out
will.
a mutual text this week, and you can talk to my associate Brandon. I think it'd be really great for you.
Perfect.
As we talk in the blind on the on the Zoom right now. All right, TJ, you go.
What do I got going on? Oh, next week I'm calling fights. Boxing. Tom Loeffler's got an event coming up in Chumash out there near Santa Barbara. Eddie Bravo Combat Jiu-Jitsu is coming back. Master Victor Davila is relaunching his MMA promotion called MMA Mexico. I'm on the road left, right, and center the next few weeks. So, follow along with me in all my adventures on Twitter, Instagram, whatever Threads is, I'm there as well at TJ DeSantis.
Very cool. And for me, I will be in London next week. Be doing other stuff this weekend, but enjoy the UFC show. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Gordon, thank you so much. Really wanting to have you on the show for a while, and a pleasure. You're extremely motivating, intelligent, and a role model to the sport, and I appreciate everything you do, Gordon, sincerely.
Of course, yeah. Thank you, guys. I've been trying to get on for a while now, so I'm glad our schedules finally matched up.
It's all good. We'll have you on again for sure, most definitely. Let's get some more championship belts under your belt, and let's talk about them in the next few months or next 6 months.
Sounds good. I'll be around.
All right, everybody, set your goals, write them down. When you step on that yellow brick road to your future, make sure you know everything you need to know so you can be the best you can be. Be a role model to your sphere of influence. And whether you're first, second, third champion or not, if you perform at your best, then you're winning. And that's what we're all about on It's Time Radio. Winning is key. Being happy is key. Being happy with yourself so you can be happy for others. And again, I'll say it one more time. Be a role model to your sphere of influence. Positivity, positive energy. Appreciate you, Gordon. Thank you so much, my friend. TJ, thank you. Gordon, I'll see you around the campus. TJ, I'll talk to you around the campus. Everybody out there, buffer out.